In the late 2000s, a rapper dominated the radio, dance floors, and even Hollywood movie trailers. He put 3 songs at the top of the Billboard charts, sold millions of records, and turned rap into the soundtrack of parties. But at the same time, a lot of people in hip-hop itself said he wasn't even a real rapper. This guy was Flo Rida. A man who came from a humble neighborhood in Miami became one of the biggest hitmakers of the digital era, and at the same time, one of the most criticized rappers of his generation. But after all, guys, do you really know what happened to Flo Rida? I'm here to tell you all about it in this video. But first, what's up, Action Crew? Listen. If you're not subscribed to this channel yet, my brother, now's the time. Subscribe, leave a like, and turn on notifications. You know I have a t-shirt store and the link will be in the description. Just like several Flo Rida related products that will show up throughout the video, it's worth checking them out and you'll also be supporting the channel. So now it's time to give a shout out to the subscribers who voted on the Flo Rida video. Let's go, because there's a lot for us to talk about regarding this guy. Trauma Lassell Dillard was born on September 16, 1979 in the famous neighborhood of Carroll City in Miami Gardens, Florida. He developed his musical taste in a rather unique way, right? Because of his sisters. Flo Rida had 7 older sisters. He was the youngest child and the only boy. Those girls, his sisters, formed a beautiful gospel choir at the church in Carroll City. So Flo Rida watched all that and gradually started to like music. When he was still a child, one of his sisters dated a stage hype man from the hip-hop group 2 Live Crew. Because of that, he enjoyed hip-hop into his teens and later joined a group in the genre. Actually, the group that Flo Rida was part of was made up of kids from his own building, some boys between 14 and 15 years old. But when he officially became a member of this group, he wasn't the rapper right away, he was actually the hype man. But around that same time, unfortunately, one of Flo Rida's sisters passed away. And from what I understood about the whole story, man, this sister was one of the people who supported him the most in pursuing his dream in his career, and at that point, he wasn't even a rapper yet. But she was one of the people who supported him the most. So he made a promise to himself to make his career a big success in memory of this sister who passed away. Well, when he was in his early 20s, a rapper named Fresh Kid Ice discovered Flo Rida and invited him to be the hype man for his shows. He even got to participate in one of the tracks on his album that came out around 2004. This work that Flo Rida did with Fresh Kid Ice caught the attention of another singer, but this time an R&B singer, Devontae Swing, one of the members of the quartet Jodeci. Devontae decided to give Flo Rida support that went a little beyond just being a hype man. The guy could also write songs and even take part in some studio sessions with him. That's when Flo Rida joined the Bassment Crew collective created by Devontae in the 90s, which launched several other artists. Well, this involvement was crucial for Flo Rida's career because there he built a network with other artists, gained more studio experience, and improved his songwriting skills. But since he wasn't a big name in music at that time, he had to hustle, just like many of you out there who do rap. I know how it is. But let me tell you something personal here, man. As a teenager, when Flo Rida rose to fame in Music with Lou, which we'll discuss later in this video, people mostly talked about how Flo Rida was the first construction worker to reach #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. That's because Flo Rida, from what I remember, right, when I was younger, he was presented as like a construction worker who became a successful rapper. And definitely, man, Flo Rida worked as a construction worker and did a bunch of other manual jobs. Besides that, he also worked in restaurants. And one of his most well-known jobs before he became famous was when he worked as a coach for a teenage basketball team. We'll find out a bit more about that in a moment, especially when discussing a certain Flo Rida song. Still, Flo Rida identified as a musician and wanted this dream to honor his sister's memory. But while working those jobs, he kept selling mixtapes, still believing he would make it one day. And even though Flo Rida had connections in the music industry, he had a problem. In the late 90s and early 2000s, around that time, we know who the rappers that were on top were, right? It was 50 Cent, Ja Rule, Jay-Z, Eminem. And none of those guys had the pop vibe that Flo Rida, even back then in his mixtapes, was already showing. Those who really liked rap liked raw rap, street rap, the real rap, but it was true to who Flo Rida was. He was never from the streets the way the others I mentioned were, so why would he rap about something that wasn't true? Because of this, he was hurt as many record labels closed their doors to him even though they acknowledged his talent. They closed their doors to him and didn't even want to hear about his mixtapes. So Flo Rida went and enrolled at the University of Las Vegas, which is in Nevada. He tried to study international business administration, but he stayed in college for only 2 months. Thinking that this wasn't the right path for him, he went to Barry University. And there he also stayed for another 2 months. What can you do, right, guys? When rap calls you, it calls you. Well, actually, it wasn't rap. It wasn't rap that called Rida this time, but rather a representative from the independent label Boy Entertainment. But you must be wondering, damn, why would someone drop out of college to join an independent label? I mean, one that doesn't guarantee anything? The thing is, the owner of the label, E-Class, saw commercial potential in Flo Rida's songs, especially in his ability to create hooks, or huge catchy parts with radio appeal. Then Flo Rida realized he was getting more attention in the music scene, and the Miami scene as a whole was growing, and if he kept splitting his time between studying and making music, he could miss an important opportunity. And he was right. Through Boy, he started associating with big names in Southern US rap who were really hyped at the time, like Lil Jon, T-Pain, Trina, and Ricky Royce, for example. I'm talking about around 2004 here, when everyone was already getting somewhere, right? At least with something going on. During this time, he recorded a song called Birthday featuring Ricky Ross. There once was a man that lived in the shoe next to a bakery that I knew. His excuse, he had Royce.
There once was a man that lived in the shoe next to a bakery that I knew. His excuse, he had his...
And another one called Beach, I'm from Dade County, which ended up being released on the 2007 album We the Best by who? DJ Khaled. But about this album, we've already talked about it in the specific video about our dear Khaled, and I think also in the one about Pitbull, man. We talked about it there too. But just so you can see how important this album was, man, by DJ Khaled, he brought everyone together there in the United States, and, well, not everyone, but a good part of them at least had a long career in rap. Snappy braids and head of shade. Look here shit, rear me really. Around the middle of 2007 to the end of that same year, Flo Rida. He wasn't a huge name, he wasn't really blown up. What we actually knew was that he was already almost 30 years old. And as we see here in several videos on the channel, people consider it old, right? Being 30 years old when you start out in rap is considered terrible, But with the success of those 2 singles I mentioned to you, Boy Entertainment decided to invest a little more in Flo Rida and said, hey man, how about we release his studio album just to see how things turn out? That's when Flo Rida, together with Boy, started to put together what would be his first studio album, his debut album called Mail on Sunday. And for that, they brought in DJ Monty to help out on some tracks. DJ Monty had already worked with some artists from the Southern United States. When Flo Rida heard the instrumental of a certain song, he realized there was something there that would work really well in clubs. He wrote the lyrics, the rap part, and called his old friend who had already become a hit-making machine named T-Pain to write the chorus, and that's how the song was born. Low, 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 low. But Boy, together with Atlantic Records, who would also help release the album, they didn't like Low because they thought it was too much of a club song, too much of a club track. It wouldn't be a song that would be good to play on the radio. But it turned out that this song was released at a really good time. Low started growing little by little on the radio. People began to see that it had potential, so Boy managed to license this track for the movie Step Up 2, The Streets, which would come out in February 2018. The movie was totally focused on urban dance and street culture, exactly what could attract an audience to that song. And whoever thought of that was a genius, because that was really the game changer. Low was gaining a lot of momentum on the radio at the end of 2007, as I told you. The movie premiered in February 2008, and they basically helped each other. And the result, Low was a worldwide hit. Yow. The track debuted at number 91 on the Hot 100 and ended up reaching the top number 1. In other words, Flo Rida, with his debut album that hadn't even been released yet, had already made a big entrance, debuting with the track at number 1 on the Hot 100. Low became the longest running number 1 song since Beyonce's Irreplaceable in 2007 and was only surpassed by I Got a Feeling by the Black Eyed Peas in 2009. Besides being considered the biggest song of 2008 by Billboard itself, and look, I'm telling you, this was a time when every song was a hit, one hit after another. 2008, man, there wasn't a single bad song. Taking advantage of the hype from Low and the movie Step Up 2, The Streets, Flo Rida went ahead and officially released the album Right Mail on Sunday. And with that, he released another single, which was the song Elevator. Man, I remember that a month later, Madonna released that song 4 Minutes to Save the World with Justin Timberlake. People kept comparing the two songs back then, saying they used the same backing track, which makes a lot of sense because Timbaland is featured on both songs and he's also the producer of both songs. So mashups with 4 Minutes and Elevator were everywhere on the old internet back then. And the May on Sunday era was a success, but let's be honest, Low carried the album throughout the whole year of 2008. And even though Flo Rida had released other singles, that song really became his identity at that time. But with that, Flo Rida realized that he needed to release more songs and as quickly as possible, right? Because he was already becoming too associated with Low. He could become a one-hit wonder or something like that, you know? So that same year, he started working on what would be his second studio album, which would come out exactly a year later, but let's take it step by step. At the end of 2008, Flo Rida went into the studio with several pop artists and producers, since at that time he was basically becoming mainstream, so let's go full pop. Then he brought in names like Travis Barker from Blink-182, Benny Blanco, who at that time was probably around 20 years old, and other already hyped guys like will.i.am, who was blowing up with Black Eyed Peas and Neo to write some things for him. But one guy in that production was gonna make all the difference. And if you thought of Dr. Luke, you were right. Dr. Luke helped launch or write hits for the biggest pop artists of that time, like for example, Britney Spears, Kelly Clarkson, and so on. And at the end of 2008, he was reaping the rewards of one he had just helped launch. Her name, Lady Gaga. Just to add, Flo Rida actually has a song in collaboration with Lady Gaga on her first studio album, The Fame. If I'm not mistaken, the song is called Starstruck and was produced by Dr. Luke. But then to cap off this new era for Flo Rida, he and Dr. Luke went to the studio and started thinking about something that would really make a big impact too. That's when Dr. Luke brought in the sample from the song You Spin Me Round by the band Dead or Alive from the 80s. But the big detail here is that when the initial demo of this song was ready, it was kind of missing a female voice to give it that special touch, to make it a bit more unique, right, for the song they were creating. So Dr. Luke had a group of young songwriters there, female songwriters, right, who were around. He called one of them over and said, hey, record the guide vocals for this song so we can check it out. Maybe it was to, I don't know, send it as a demo to some very famous pop singer so she could record it as a feature with Flo Rida, something like that. I know that in the end, that guide vocal together with Flo Rida's voice matched perfectly, and this woman's voice was kept in the final version that went on the album. You don't know her name, do you? It's Kesha. And the name of this song? Yeah, Ride Round. When Ride Round was released, this track automatically went to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. In fact, back then, Kesha wasn't even credited there as a feature, but that wouldn't last long, you know? Because not long after, she blew up with the song TikTok, and then there was no denying that the voice there, you know, that random woman's voice on Flo Rida's song was Kesha's voice.
Don't stop, make it pop, DJ, blow my speakers up.
After Kesha became famous, she gave interviews discussing how the song was created. She said she got little money for the track, and only after becoming famous did she get the recognition she deserved, right? Because of the instant success of Ride Round, Hollywood started using this track in marketing and movie soundtracks related to party culture. After all, Flo Rida was starting to be seen as that kind of rapper, and the track got so hyped that it started showing up in the trailer for the movie The Hangover, which hadn't even been released yet. And with that, people started associating the song with the movie, simply one of the most iconic and chaotic films of that generation. That's why when you're out having fun at parties and posting stories, you use Ride Round in the background, even if people don't always know why. But shortly before the premiere of The Hangover, Flo Rida had released his second studio album titled Roots. And Roots already came with the single Sugar, which was a collaboration with the R&B singer Winter Gordon, and it interpolates the song Blue, Da Ba Dee, by the Italian music group Eiffel 65. Man, this song got a lot of play here in Brazil. Then we get into the year 2010, and already established in the pop scene, Flo Rida wanted to show the whole world that there was no rapper more pop-oriented than him. He was unique, at least that's how I saw it back then. So he went on Twitter to announce his upcoming third studio album. This album would be called The Only One. But before that, of course, Flo Rida released a test single, which was very successful, and in my opinion, it's Flo Rida's best song, man, which is Club Can Handle Me, a collaboration with David Guetta. Released in June 2010, man, I remember like it was yesterday, the day I downloaded this song, dude. I downloaded it on my birthday in November, on November 9th, 2010. That's when I downloaded this song, and I fell in love with it, honestly. I'm not sure if I heard it when it dropped or if it got big later, man. All I know is I played it at my party and things got wild. But of course, with more movies from the Step Up franchise coming out soon, I keep getting the title mixed up, but you know the Step Up franchise, right? Obviously, Hollywood wasn't going to miss the chance to put another song on the soundtrack of this movie, another song by Flo Rida, right? So Club Can't Handle Me became part of the movie's soundtrack. In fact, a good part of the music video contains scenes from the movie. By the way, this Step Up 3 is considered one of the best by the fans. People really enjoy it. But look, I'm not going to talk about the movie. I'm going to talk about the soundtrack, man. For me, the soundtrack of this film is worthy of an Oscar, dude. Because besides having Club Can't Handle Me, there's Freak, which is Estelle's song featuring Cardinal Offishall, and there's also the legendary Already Taken by Trey Songz, which is one of my favorite songs by him. We've already discussed Trey Songz in another video here. That's why, man, I downloaded it on my birthday because Only One Flow Part 1, it came out in November, right? It came out close to my birthday. Look, this isn't even in the script, damn, but that's the deal. Only One Flow Part 1, it came out in November, and when it was released, it had like 7 or 8 tracks. It had just a few tracks. And back then on the internet, people complained a lot because, man, it felt like something was missing, you know? Even though it had that song I just mentioned, Club Can Handle Me, and it also had Turnaround. But if there's a part 1, it means there's gonna be a part 2. So people, including this young guy talking to you, started bothering Flo Rida on the internet. However, nobody was ready for this continuation of Only One Flow Part 1, which would actually be called Part 2 Part 2, but he decided to change the album's name, and it couldn't have had a more iconic name than Wild Ones. Very inspired by EDM and all the electronic music that was dominating the radio in 2011, Flo Rida released this album without testing the waters with a single first or anything. He just didn't care. And without hesitation, he went ahead and released the first single of the Wild Ones era, which was Good Feeling, released in August 2011. And now we have a quick video crossover here. You definitely watched the previous video to this one you're watching now, where I was telling the story of Avicii. In it, I mentioned that Avicii created the song Levels, and for that, he used a sample from the song Something's Got a Hold on Me from 1962 by the singer Etta James. In the end, I will... This track is simply a gospel music classic over in the United States. Officially, Levels was only released in October 2011. However, as I mentioned in this Avicii video, Avicii made this song at the beginning of that same year, 2011, and started promoting this track. At the shows he was doing, especially when he went to the United States or the trendy capitals over in Europe, it was kind of to test the audience's reaction to those songs anyway. That's when probably Flo Rida and Dr. Luke were present at one of those parties where Avicii played, or they heard some version of Levels somewhere and decided to sample Avicii's track in Good Feeling. So that's why when you check the credits on Spotify for the song Good Feeling, you'll see that Avicii is credited there under the name Tim Bergling and Ash Pornuri, who is Avicii's manager. So we assume that Flo Rida sampled Avicii, who in turn sampled Etta James, right? Actually, Flo Rida directly sampled Etta James, you know? What confuses a lot of people is that Flo Rida released Good Feeling before Levels officially, but Levels was already out there. And the most interesting part of this is that Etta James herself actually witnessed all of this, because unfortunately she passed away 3 months after Avicii released the song Levels in January 2012. I saved this whole thing to talk about in this Flo Rida video to show you that all of my videos here are connected, and I bet you didn't know about this. If you did or didn't, comment below. But in this album, Wild Ones, Flo Rida totally gave into EDM, I think even more than Pitbull did at that time. And the next single, it was emotional, it launched careers. I'm talking about it, Wild Ones. Man, and it was in many ways because Wild Ones featured Sia singing the chorus. I'll talk more in a moment, but it featured Sia singing the chorus after Titanium had come out, you know? Titanium, I think, was gaining a lot of strength on the radio, on MTV and all that, and then she followed it up with Wild Ones, and man, what a beautiful song. And it even enriches Sia's career, right? Because until then, before Titanium and Wild Ones 2, Sia was just a singer and songwriter relatively well known in Australia. And in the rest of the world, she was known for being held captive by Beyonce. Just kidding, I'm joking. But the cool part is that Wild Ones wasn't supposed to be a Flo Rida song. It was actually meant to be a Katy Perry song since Sia wrote it for her, sent it over by email, and to this day, yeah, we're in 2026 now, Katy Perry still hasn't replied whether she liked Wild Ones or not. And who doesn't remember that Wild Ones and Good Feeling were the soundtrack for WrestleMania 28, if I'm not mistaken? What year was that, man? This video is pure nostalgia, it's crazy. The third single from Wild Ones made you blow Flo Rida's whistle. Hold on, let me explain. The song Whistle was a hit, Flo Rida's third #1 on the Hot 100 after Low and Right Round, but even though it was so successful, this song caused some controversy in the United States because of its double entendre lyrics, you know? If you know the translation of whistle, you already know what it is, but Flo Rida himself in later interviews later explained what the real meaning of those lyrics was, right? He said that back when he was a high school basketball coach for teenagers, he had like an intern, right? A girl there who was also a referee along with him. And the girl sometimes made some decisions that were a bit questionable in Flo Rida's opinion. And he simply went up to her and said some phrases that are in the song Whistle. You can picture Flo Rida saying, "Can you blow my whistle, baby? Do it like this." It's weird, but that's the story he told. And the fourth single, I know a lot of people like it, and it's not one of my favorites, is the song I Cry. I Cry samples the song Cry Just a Little by Bingo Players. I love it. But the big criticism of this song at the time was that people missed having someone like Sia on this track because everyone said the track was really beautiful, it was really cool, but it was missing that feminine touch. Maybe people got used to Kesha, Sia, and the other singers who collaborated with Flo Rida on his big hits and kind of wanted this song to be like that too, but it didn't happen. What I think is cool about this track is that it's like a retrospective of Flo Rida's life with several scenes, including him when he was younger, and others filmed in Carol City, which is where he grew up. After so many hits, Flo Rida took it a bit easier, and around 2012, 2013, he kind of took a break and all that, but in 2014, the man decided to come back, man, and he came back without much fanfare. Boom, another hit. That's because he released an EP called My House, which was a huge hit. Out of the 7 songs on the My House EP, I can name at least 3 for you that were big hits, right? One of them was GDFR, right? Going Down for Real, featuring Sage the Gemini. By the way, where is that guy now, man? Sage the Gemini, like people used to say in the No Spoiler group. That song was top 10, it's going down for real. Next was the song My House, which reached #4 on the Billboard Hot 100. Also honorable mention to Hit It Is, his track with Chris Brown, which many people enjoy. Well, guys, I think everything really relevant that I could say about Flo Rida I've already said, you know, which was his peak of success. So now we get into that part that's a bit more controversial about the artist himself, and like I always say, with great hits come great responsibilities. I think the biggest criticism of Flo Rida has always been the fact that he's a rapper but extremely mainstream. Actually, he presented himself as a rapper, but when you listen to his album, it was pure bare bones radio club pop. The criticism that his rap was empty was very common. In fact, a newspaper published a very famous review back in the Roots era saying that project seemed like something made to please everyone. Quote, "In an attempt to please everyone, the album becomes a collection of club tracks without substance." In other words, catchy hits, check, lyrical depth, not so much. When Right Round was also released, it was heavily criticized because people, you know, the music connoisseurs said that Flo Rida kind of ruined a classic hit from the 80s. And a critic from Digital Spy even wrote this: "It's hard to ruin a pop classic, but Flo Rida almost manages to do it." The song was also criticized for repetitive lyrics, strip club themes, and extremely pop production. And obviously, as you've probably seen throughout this video, there was a cultural problem with hip-hop at that time, which, man, considered names like Nice, Jay-Z, Eminem as rappers because these guys had status and narratives within hip-hop. But Flo Rida didn't have that, man. But as for that, I don't think Flo Rida ever really cared, you know? At least he never seemed to care about it publicly. But there was something else that really caught the public's attention, and this was more recent and involved Flo Rida's name. He was almost canceled because of this situation, which was his ex-wife saying that he abandoned his son with special needs. So what happened? Flo Rida has a son who in 2023 suffered a serious fall from a building in an apartment complex in New Jersey. The boy fell from the 5th floor and suffered very serious injuries, including skull fractures, a punctured lung, and internal injuries. Fortunately, the kid survived, but he needed surgeries and a lot of special care. But then after this accident, the boy's mother came out publicly to say that Flo Rida was an absent father, that he didn't provide support for the child, especially after the accident, and he didn't help raise the boy. She stated that she alone covered the child's basic needs and all expenses. This accusation made several American newspapers and tabloids say that Flo Rida really abandoned his son. Well, what happened after all this? The main lawsuit was against the condominium itself for security and window failures. The court ended up granting a multi-million-dollar compensation to the boy. And Flo Rida wasn't convicted because the lawsuit wasn't directly about him. He was just left with the stigma of being an absent father, as the mother claimed. But with all that alright, how is Flo Rida doing nowadays in 2026? Well, he's not at the top of the charts like he used to be, right? Back then, there wasn't even Spotify, right? But he broke several digital sales records. If he were debuting today, he'd be at the top of Spotify. But he's still active, man. He's even releasing a lot of music. He's still big, just in a different way. Flo Rida became a big draw at festivals, corporate events, private parties, and 2000s nostalgia shows. And like I said, his more recent tracks still have that 2000s and 2010s vibe, and recently the guy won a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Flo Rida sued the energy drink company Celsius, claiming he wasn't properly paid for a promotional partnership. He won in 2023 and received a multi-million-dollar compensation of around $82.6 million, which would be about 430 million Rs for us here. This greatly increased his fortune, and this lawsuit is also known as one of the biggest legal wins by a rapper in the United States. And having said all that, in the end, Flo Rida was never exactly the kind of artist that hip-hop usually immortalizes. He didn't become known for classic albums, memorable bars, or deep narratives, things that usually define a rapper's legacy. His place in history ended up being different. Flo Rida was one of the artists who did the most to turn rap into party music in the late 2000s, mixing hip-hop, pop, and electronic music in a way that dominated radio and dance floors all over the world. So maybe that's why his legacy isn't included among the greatest rappers in history, but his case is simpler than it seems. Flo Rida's legacy lives on at parties and on nostalgic playlists from the 2000s, and in that late night moment when you secretly go and listen to Low Right Round Good Feeling, or when it accidentally starts playing and everyone recognizes it right away. Because after all, to me, being part of the hip-hop movement or being a rapper is about leaving a mark, and Flo Rida left his mark. Just on the dance floors, right? But that's just what I think. I want to know what you guys think. Now, a little surprise for you all. This video here is an updated remake of the same video I made on this channel back in 2021. Check it out to see if anything has changed. And by the way, big shout out to Gerson Saldanha. See you in our next video, and thanks!